Queens, and most of it's fossil fuel driven. And there's a cost to that. West of 21st Street has higher than the Queensboro average asthma rates. And in that same vicinity is the Astoria houses, the Ravenswood houses, and the Queensbridge houses. So they're going to the hospital at higher rates than the other residents in Queens for both ER visits and hospitalizations. This is, and it's generational. Ms. Koger, my good friend at the Astoria Tenants Association, talks about how she doesn't have asthma. She's 86. Used to march with Dr. King, an amazing woman, like unbelievable. But her kids have asthma, her grandkids have asthma, her great-grandkids have asthma. It's generational here in Western Queens. And that's the cycle we're trying to break. And, you know, we're shutting down Asthma Alley. And as we shut down Asthma Alley, we're thinking about what Renewable Row can look like. And Equinor Wind bringing in about 1,200 megawatts of renewable power to this community is a big deal. And, you know, as someone who did environmental policy for the city for 15 years, Local Law 97, worked on Renewable Rikers Island, you know, the we get to these renewable energy goals if we actually like put our money or really our money where our mouth is. We can't just talk about it, we got to be about it. So I'm glad to partner with great organizations like Urban Upbound and Queens Together and Old Astoria Neighborhood Association to present this to you guys tonight and have Equinor come here and answer questions and make sure that people understand that this is a huge deal for this community. It's going to create good jobs. It's going to bring Queens renewable power, clean renewable power to our neighborhood. It's going to help us all breathe easier. So thank you, Anna, and thank you for the Equinor team for coming here tonight. And we're looking forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thank you so much. So I'll give you a little overview of what we're going to be doing today. I'm realizing, Harrison, I might need your help in clicking through the presentation because I only have 2 hands. Do you want to introduce yourself? You could just okay. All right. Sorry, Harrison. Do you want to try the mouse and see if it works? It should probably work at some point. Sorry about that. So we'll introduce Equinor with an overview of all our projects and commitments in New York, as well as our approach to bringing these projects online. We'll give you a project overview of Beacon Wind 1, cover how we can get involved in upcoming public processes. We'll have a short Q&A. And then we'll head into the poster session where you can meet some of our teams and have more in-depth conversations about what you care about most. So who is Equinor? Okay, we'll just thank you, Harrison. I appreciate it. So we have a robust team today. Some of them are along the wall right here. You guys want to wave? Yeah, that's our team, and some of them are sitting amongst you. We have a robust team from various disciplines within our project to provide substantive answers to your questions. So thank you, team, for being here today. So Equinor is a broad energy company with headquarters in Norway. We have 20,000 employees worldwide, and we've been in the US since the 1980s. Equinor has clear ambitions to be a leader in the energy transition and have more than a decade of experience in offshore wind. We also have net zero goals by 2050. We're really excited to partner with local communities like Astoria and delivering on that. We have partnered with other leading companies in the energy transition around the globe. This map gives you a good overview of the scale of our commitment in the US, as well as our ambitions here. Equinor is honored to have been chosen by New York State to supply clean, local offshore wind energy to the largest population center on the East Coast. The Empire and Beacon Wind projects, which you'll see in red, are a 50-50 joint venture between Equinor and BP, with Equinor as the final operator. You can see here in red, we are developing 2 projects for New York, Empire Wind 1, which is at the bottom left, and Beacon Wind 1. Together, these projects will power about 2 million homes. And today's presentation will particularly focus on Empire Wind 1. As part of our commitment to the region, Equinor will also invest in workforce and economic development initiatives, as well as support regional environmental monitoring and research. And I should note that we're still very early on in setting the process for that, but we're really looking forward to engaging with communities on that. So we're bringing, as Costa said, we're bringing renewable energy that will not only offset fossil fuels, but will be cheaper to develop and more predictable in the long term. We're also building an industry with shared benefits across economic development, environment, and health. NYSERDA estimates that our project will result in about 2 billion in health benefits from reduced hospitalizations. Across our New York projects, NYSERDA estimates an increase of less than $2 totally on your monthly power bill. So these costs are shared across the states. So we know that we have an obligation to put more into the community than just the power that we're putting into the grid. We're a values-driven company, and our community-based development framework is informed by that. Our values are open, courageous, collaborative, and caring, and how we deliver our projects are just as important as what we deliver. So New York State has ambitious clean energy goals. Some of you might know about them, including procuring 70% of the state's energy from renewable sources by 2030. Offshore wind will contribute significantly to meeting that target, and Equinor will play a major role in helping New York State reach its goals. Our projects will provide 3.3 gigawatts towards that 9 gigawatt goal. And we also recognize that the clean energy goals were set and the market developed in large part because of activism and advocacy of environmental justice communities like Astoria. And you are incredibly important stakeholders in these projects. We look forward to working with you as a project develops to ensure climate investments go where they are most needed. So there's an incredible excitement, and this is an incredible opportunity. We're ensuring that New York State becomes a manufacturing hub for the entire offshore wind industry in the US and capturing the development potential from the industry locally in New York. So Equinor is constructing new offshore wind manufacturing hubs at the Port of Albany. You might have seen it in the news, and also at the South Brooklyn Marine Terminal, where we also just opened our Brooklyn office, which I encourage you to visit. We're going to have a learning center there at some point. We're funding more than 100 million in port upgrades on top of city and state funding, and both ports will employ hundreds of New Yorkers to assemble components for wind projects up and down the coast. We're also building the workforce of the future to support the growing industry and working with local partners. We want to meet with local nonprofits, with after-school programs, with academic institutions. So if you're part of one, please see me after. I really want to talk to you. All right, now we'll get into some specifics about Beacon Wind 1. Now you might be asking, why offshore wind? So wind blows stronger and more consistently offshore than it does over land. And water off the coast of Long Island and New England has some of the world's best offshore wind resources. Importantly, offshore wind provides energy where and when you need it most. It's close to populated areas. It also is great because wind blows strongest exactly when we need it. So during the morning when we're getting ready to work, and in the evening when we're coming home. The turbines capture strong ocean winds and convert it to clean, zero emissions electricity, which is carried through a series of cables to an offshore substation, which you'll see here in the graphic, then to a substation on land, where it is then distributed to our grid. The project goes through federal jurisdictions as well as state and local, which means we go through rigorous permitting processes at multiple levels, with the Bureau of Ocean and Energy Management, or BOEM, at the federal level, and with the New York State Public Service Commission Article 7 process at the state level. The project will also meet local regulations at the point of interconnection. So Beacon Wind was awarded by New York State in 2021. We finalized the contract in 2022. It will occupy the northern half of the Beacon Wind lease area, which you see here, which is located 60 miles east of Montauk and 20 miles south of Nantucket. Beacon is one of the several wind farms that you see developed in the area, and you can see the other shapes around our lease area. Operations and maintenance for the project will be based at the South Brooklyn Marine Terminal, so here in New York City, and Beacon Wind is expected to be operational by 2028. So at the heart of our project design is the grid of wind turbine generators. Approximately 82 are anticipated, with generating capacity of at least 50 megawatts each. They will extend up to 1,086 feet above sea level, and it's a feat of engineering on the scale of the Empire State Building. The grid layout itself is a product of collaboration between developers in this federal lease area, as well as federal agencies, fisheries group, and other stakeholders. The turbines will be laid out on a 1-by-1 nautical mile grid to allow for activity by fishermen and marine users to operate in and transit through the lease area. Fun fact, one rotation of a turbine blade can power an average New York home for approximately 1.5 days. Our agreement with the state of New York specifies that New York Wind project must interconnect to a specific zone within the NYSO, the Independent System Operator. In other words, directly into New York City. So this power is going to power New York City homes. The cable will run through federal waters, then it will run through New York waters of the Long Island Sound, as you can see in this graphic. We're developing a route that utilizes minimum onshore disruption. So the proposed subsea route was identified based on extensive analysis of publicly available data, on feedback from experts in government, science, and industry, and considerations of installed assets and marine users and other stakeholders to balance technical feasibility and to avoid and minimize impacts to the environment. So the cable route will come into, next slide, please. So I think this is going to be the most of interest. The cable route will come into the East River to Astoria in Queens. The precise landing and substation are not yet finalized, but they'll be located at existing industrial sites to minimize onshore routing and public disturbance. The living floating box that you see, just to show the size and possible layout of the substation, won't be hovering above the water, but be somewhere on that industrial land there. We're very excited to be bringing clean, renewable energy to this location and speaking to what Costa said, turning Asma Alley into Renewable Row. So it's a long journey to get to first power. We're currently in the phase of extensive and careful studies and surveys of the lease area and cable route, working to understand the wind and water conditions, as well as the marine wildlife behavior, the seabed conditions at the site and along the cable route, and so on. So next year, we'll begin important filing for the state and federal regulatory process. More on that in a moment. And we'll begin construction after 2025 when preparations are completed. The plan is to generate first power in 2028. All right, so now I'll give you a little bit about the public processes and how you can get involved, how you can provide feedback in addition to providing feedback to us today. So because the Empire Wind 1 includes electricity transmission components, the Beacon Wind project must file something called Article 7 with the New York State Public Service Commission. It is a process intended by the state to ensure new electricity infrastructure best meets the needs and expectations of New Yorkers in an environmentally responsible manner. We recognize this permit is an important step, not just to receive state approval to proceed, but because it's a robust process with opportunities for public input. In other words, it's a formal means by which the developer must do right by the public. Beacon Wind, a project submitted its Article 7 filing in May of this year. In the lead up to the filing, we published notices in local papers. Some of you might have seen it. informed property owners about the proposed route. And going forward, you can follow the proceedings as well as comment during the public statement hearings. You can find more about the Article 7 process on the DPS website, www.dps.newyork.gov, article7.htm, as well as on our website, beaconwind.com. So before we head into the Q&A and poster session, we want to continue hosting public meetings virtually and in person in the coming months for Beacon Wind. So please sign up for updates on our website at beaconwind.com and follow us on Twitter at Equinor Wind US. You can also connect with us via our hotline, which is 833-699-1965, as well as sending us an email at beaconwind@equinor.com. You can stay informed on the federal process at the federal level at www.permits.performance.gov/projects. You can just search Beacon Wind. And you can follow the Article 7 process at www.dps.newyork.gov. And our case number is 22T0294. We'll have multiple opportunities to submit public comments, both for the federal and state processes, and we anticipate those to be in the fall of 2022. So please stay involved. And now we will transition to the Q&A. So I'm going to ask my team members to come up to the front because I'll probably have a pivot to some of the questions too. So come on up.
Anybody have any questions? Mike here.
Okay, hi there, everyone. So just a couple of technical questions regarding this wind field. The turbines are going to be 1 square mile apart. So in other words, in 1 square mile, there is a turbine at each corner, and just repeat until the field is filled out. Okay, and this is a direct connection from the Beacon field to Astoria with no other interconnections to, say, Long Island or Nantucket or Martha's Vineyard or Rhode Island, et cetera?
That's correct. Does anyone want to elaborate? Teddy, do you want to elaborate or?
Okay, no, I'm just looking at it because usually what happens is that whenever there's a wind farm, it just kind of it just connects to the local grid, in which case Montauk gets the electricity first and just gets passed down the line until it hits New York at the very end. So in this case, this is a dedicated line.
So it's a dedicated high voltage line direct from the field, from the wind farm directly to Queens. Yeah, no stops, no drop offs. Straight here.
Okay.
Anybody else?
So I see the geographic location is closer to Massachusetts than it is to New York. I saw, you had some you wanted some support, you wanted some questions and on the comment periods and so forth. Because it's a New York project, it was awarded by NYSERDA. Is there anything in other locals that you might need support from because it's closer to Massachusetts? Are they involved in anything, or is it just because it's in federal waters, they're out of the picture?
Does anyone want to take that one? Or I think right now it's a New York project. That's our main customer. We're focused on New York. Obviously, you saw our global ambitions, our U.S. ambitions. So we still have the Beacon Wind 2 lease area, so we don't have a buyer for that. I think that's kind of the so yeah.
Yeah, for the operations side, our main operations are coming into New York, but that's not to say there aren't going to be any impacts on other communities. So that's something that we're actually doing a lot of work at the moment to map, to really understand what benefits we can bring, not just to New York, but just by being present in the water, maybe to the local fishermen that will more likely be from the Massachusetts area. what health and safety benefits we can bring by coexisting and cohabiting these areas. So yeah, we are looking wider, but with regards to a lot of this work that you'll see here, our main focus is New York. This is where the power is coming. But absolutely, any nearby other users we will look to work with as well.
Thanks. I work with fisheries on the Equinor projects, and I can say that we have had stakeholder outreach to fishermen all the way from Cape May, New Jersey, up to Nantucket, Massachusetts, for the past 4 years or so. And we've relied on fishermen to work on board our survey vessels in the lease areas. And also we've chartered fishing boats as scout boats to support our offshore operations. So that's one example of the regional outreach that we're having. We work with New York fishermen as well as many fishermen from other states in the region.
Thank you, Harriet. Thank you, Steve. Any other questions? Yes.
Why is it taking so long to get the damn things in the water?
Well,
I could do that in like a few weeks.
Well, I'll say that we go through rigorous permitting, which takes time, and there's time for public comment. Our proposals have to be reviewed, so it's a rigorous process. So that's takes time. There's also, I don't know, Teddy, you're looking at me as like you have something to add. So
I want to see. Well, maybe we could say it this way in a sense. So we showed a slide that compared the magnitude of scale, right? Each one of these wind turbines is the equivalent of an Empire State Building. Each blade, so you're putting 3 blades on each turbine. Each blade is longer than a football field. So when you say you could put one in, I'd like to see you lift one of those blades. But just to give you a sense of the magnitude, this is world class. These are going to be the largest in the world. We're developing the largest offshore wind export transmission cable in the world that's going to be delivering straight from that beacon wind directly to Queens. So this is pretty unprecedented of what's happening here, and the size and scale of these turbines is also world leading. I mean, we'll be using the largest turbines in the world for our project. So it is a very complex installation, and with that comes a very complex permitting process, which takes we're talking about 4 or 5 years on the permitting process alone to give us the right to then actually begin the construction of these projects. So it is a massive undertaking, but just not to downplay what the size and scale of this is. We're putting in, well over, a couple hundred Empire State Buildings in the water, right? So that has to be done very delicately.
Whose state line are you going to be in?
So we're in federal waters. Most of our cable, probably 3/4 of our cable, will be in New York State waters for Beacon.
We have an online question. How will the offshore infrastructure affect/impact life and potential livelihood of fishermen?
Sure. Thank you. This is a question that we've looked at and continue to look at through the permitting process and through the operation of the wind farms. There are no plans to exclude any fishing from the project areas or from the cable routes. The layouts have been discussed extensively with fishermen in an attempt to set up the wind farms with the appropriate turbine spacing, the space between turbines, and also straight rows of turbines where fishermen will be able to continue to fish with traditional gear. We've been in discussion with fishermen's groups at the regional level and at the state level for more than 4 years now, working on issues like that. And our goal is to execute the project in a way that the construction and the operation of the project won't have significant impacts on the fisheries. And we will strive to minimize those impacts and mitigate them as best we can throughout the project. I personally, I started my career as a commercial fisherman in Rhode Island long years ago, and we've built working relations with the fishermen that are ongoing throughout the region for these projects. If that, any more questions about fishing, I'd be glad to take them now or after the group discussion.
So we do already have offshore wind farms in the UK. We've been operating them for a number of years. The oldest is around 10 years now. And from the experience there, we have actually seen that these structures being present in the water actually do create artificial reefs. So we've got a very healthy relationship with the local fishermen in those areas. It's in Norfolk in the UK. And we see a lot, particularly shellfish, actually, in the region, more so than previously because of the reef environment that is created by the structures and by the scour protection we have out in the wind farm. So I think there's a lot more research needed that we can do, but there's definitely some positive impacts on marine life as well.
Sorry, we could go on about fishing for a long time, but I will add that according to the contract that Equinor has with New York State, there are several $1 million that are allocated to research for commercial fish species and other wildlife impacts. So yeah, it's been the subject of many years of study, which will be ongoing.
Thank you both. Any more questions? Yes.
Thank you. So how will this offset the need for peaker plants?
Well, I think, Teddy?
You're probably best suited to speak to this, Alex. So he'll correct me if I get anything wrong. But you know, we talked about the wind profile in a day, right? And how it matches a bit of the load curve of the demand that we use, right? When we turn our lights on and run our appliances at home. So a lot of what this is going to do is follow our load path, and it should then effectively, you have your base load projects that come in. This is going to add shape that follows the overall load profile. So it would ultimately then reduce the peak need for fossil demand, right? Because it's going to shrink that amount that's on the margin during those peak times. So effectively, our project alone is not going to eliminate that need, but it's going to certainly shrink. And we hope, our project is one of a continued projects that New York State is pushing in terms of clean energy. And then we're also seeing energy, battery storage projects that are getting built alongside offshore wind, whether co-located or nearby. That's also going to help to remove the need for fossil on the peak times.
So then do you expect the price spikes during the peak of the season to decrease?
That's a bit of a fully loaded question, because often, as you probably know, since you seem to know a fair amount about this, but those price spikes happen when you start to jump on the type of fossil fuel that you're consuming. So if what's on the margin ends up being a oil fueled power plant, in order to ensure that when we turn the lights on, the lights come on, then it's going to set towards oil price. But yes, it won't necessarily reduce the peak price level. It's going to reduce ultimately the number of times we go to those peak levels, right? So,
thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very good question. So.
Just another pricing question, and this is in regards to you'd mentioned that the overall price may go up about, say, $2 a month, give or take, and that's, I assume, is going to come from the supply side of the bill, considering that Con Edison just usually pulls from the general supply of electricity from the grid and then just passes that cost on to the customers. Is there any sort of plan to offer this through an ESCO or anything like that, as far as, so that let's say you want your money to go completely towards this project as opposed to the oil burning plant or natural gas fossil fuel plant?
Gotta love an ESCO question. So yeah, so ESCO, it stands for electricity. We're going to test me here. Service choice,
or energy service company or something along those lines.
So it's effectively what it is when you go and you say, okay, do I want to procure my electricity? I can get it from Con Edison, or I can go to one of these other companies to source my electricity, maybe a retail provider of electricity. So ultimately, you wouldn't be able to go directly and say, I want to source my power only from the Beacon Wind project. You could say, I want to source only renewable energy, which then would pull from this. But yes, you couldn't necessarily just contract for this power solely. So.
Okay, just a
yeah,
quick,
to expand on that a little bit, Equinor is not a retail provider. So we don't have a retail arm. We're here. We're going to be part of the total energy system deliverability that's coming into New York. So we don't have necessarily a retail arm where you're going to be able to procure energy from us directly.
And you'd mentioned that we're talking about approximately well over 100 turbines, correct?
For Beacon.
For Beacon.
Yeah.
And are you also involved with the Empire field as well?
Yes, Empire and Beacon is Equinor projects.
Are there already any turbines in the water for Empire yet, or is that also preliminary?
Empire is further along in the permitting process. So Equinor is Beacon is about 2 years behind Empire. So Empire will come online a lot sooner than Beacon will.
And is it the same size type of turbines? You mentioned that these turbines are going to be produced up in Albany, I assume?
So the turbines themselves will not, the towers that the nacelles and the blades sit on top of will be manufactured in Albany. The Empire Wind project is using the 15 megawatt turbine from a company called Vestas. Beacon Wind is going to be using the state-of-the-art turbine that's available at the time that it will procure. So that hasn't happened yet. Of course, you want to use the latest and greatest, right? And the largest. And so we have not selected yet for Beacon Wind.
Okay, but the towers themselves will be produced in Albany and I guess floated down the Hudson to Brooklyn for staging.
Exactly. They'll be barged down the Hudson, go to the staging harbor in Brooklyn, then they'll be partly pre-assembled and taken out to the field where they'll be installed.
And this is for both Empire and Beacon.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay.
And future projects too. So what we're developing is not just for Equinor. It's for the offshore wind ambitions of New York. So we're developing these ports and the manufacturing facilities to not only deliver what we need, but to be, these are expected to be running for many years to come for many other developers and players, not just in New York, but along the entire East Coast.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I saw the water depth for Beacon Wind around 40 meters and 60 meters. So have you decided the foundation type is monopile or jacket?
So we're currently looking at a number of different foundations. So I think right now jackets is the base case, but we're also looking at monopiles and suction jackets. So we were looking at all three.
Then okay, then how do you plan, I mean, the local content, I mean, fabricators or as far as I know, now in US, it will be very challenging to find a fabricator who can meet with this capacity and meet the project schedule. And also monopiles, you need to have a special facility. So how do you plan or how do you see or tackle this the supply chain issue?
That's an excellent question. I think we're really building an offshore wind industry from scratch. So I think Teddy talked a little bit about Port of Albany, where our towers will be manufactured. Based on our community-based development models, we want to source in New York and US where possible, but that's not always possible, especially as this industry is developing and growing. I don't know if the rest of the team wants to add something to that, but I think we really want to engage with local businesses, right? So we're going to hire tier 1 companies like Vestas that we did for Empire Wind, who will then hire tier 2 companies and tier 3 companies. So there are multiple avenues to get engaged in the offshore wind industry as it is growing and developing. I do encourage, if you have a business, to register for NYSERDA's offshore wind database to make sure that you are listed in there. And we will have, as Beacon develops, supplier events for businesses to engage with our supply chain experts and get into the supply chain. And I think it's really critical that we not just have us at the table, but our tier 1, 2, 3. So we're sourcing locally. I don't know if anyone wants to add. No? Okay. Thank you for that question. That's a really great question. Michael, is that your?
So your agreement with the state is for a couple of decades on each of these projects. What happens at the end of that period?
That's a really good question as well. So and you're referencing decommissioning, we will have to do the same process that we did for permitting process that we did for proposing how we built the projects. So that will go through EIS assessment or environmental impact statement assessment. Right now we are looking at Teddy, remind me, it's 25, but we're hoping for longer, right? So once we reach closer to that time, we want to extend the life. And who knows where we'll be in 25 years from now. The technology might be so advanced that a lot of those foundations could be reused. But as far as what we know now, we'll go through the same rigorous permitting process to make sure that we are building and decommissioning in the most responsible way. Teddy? No?
Yeah, as you rightly observed, the contracts that we have don't necessarily last as long as what we expect the design life for the projects to be. So I'll let Teddy talk a little bit more about the commercials, but we are then more exposed to market pricing, or we have to come up with another business model for that period onwards. But it is our goal throughout the operations to try and extend the life as much as possible. What we've put in at the start in terms of all of the environmental impacts, obviously the longer the project is there for, the more worthwhile that is. The more carbon that we can offset by the project being there longer, the better it is environmentally. So, for both commercial reasons and environmental reasons, we do actually want to try and extend the life of these projects as much as possible. But as Anna said, at some point we will get to the end of the design life for these assets and the end of the technical life, and we need to figure out what to do then, whether it is repowering. So you may be able to reuse certain bits. I'm very much a believer in a cradle to cradle approach rather than cradle to grave. So anything you can reuse directly. And we're also taking up the best wind spots right now. So what is currently in the water, what we're putting in the water are the best spots to have wind. So I do think that there will be an appetite later in life to revitalize these areas and still continue to use them.
And it's not just the lease areas. We're also looking at, how we can make sure that the blades are recyclable. So it's not just the lease area and the foundations, but also making sure that the steel that's going into these projects are not just going to going to be wasted. So we're thinking, and I think some of the leading technology right now is looking on how to reuse the blades, how to reuse the towers. So I think we're also looking at that.
We have a few online questions. They've
Okay.
been very patient.
Why don't we switch? And I just wanted to, how are we doing on time, Kate? What time is it?
We are at 6:45.
Okay, so maybe 10 more minutes and then we'll switch to the poster sessions where you guys can speak more closely with our team.
One of the questions is, are you able to reiterate the current stage that Equinor is in the project?
Sure, why don't I go to the timeline for folks? Thanks, Calvin. I think it's, yes, there it is. So we just filed our Article 7 process, which is kind of launches that. We filed our construction operations plan, so that will go through something called an environmental impact statement. We're waiting to make sure all of these applications are complete and meet all the requirements, and after that we will kind of have a launch, and we'll have a public statement hearing for each. Teddy, do you want to, or who would like to talk about maybe about operation maintenance or some of the other, like where we are in the process?
So there's no physical assets in the water yet, so nothing really to operate and maintain, but there's a lot of planning that needs to go into that. We need to make sure that the design is appropriate for the longevity of the assets, making it as easy as possible to maintain and to operate. Again, the more we have to be out there, the more kind of vessels we need. There is an impact there. So again, trying to make sure that throughout all of these environmental impact assessments, we're considering the entire operational life as well, and everything that needs to go into that. So we're really at a stage where it's a paper project. So it's very much planning and mapping for the operations side, but very much getting that focused in early so that we're enabling the best way to operate the project.
Gonna let you say that part. Yeah, so the plan for Beacon is to operate it out of the O&M base at SB&T. So when that comes online or starts to get constructed in 2 years or so, you'll start to see pieces in the ground for the operation of the facility. So be exciting.
My question is that I believe that we have to do some substations and preparation work before you do anything in the water. Have you made any examples? Have you made dummies up so that contractors could go in there and figure out what you actually want? Do you have drawings? I mean, I think it's really important to know that there's more than just the wind tower, whether or not the paddles are going to be, good. We have to find out about the construction previous to that. So, I mean, have you made any preparation? Have you talked to any contractors regarding that? I'm a local suite contractor. I'm a minority. I'm WB, and I know that a lot of my work is preparation before we do major things. What have you come up with? I mean, I realize that you started out in 2019, but I haven't seen anything from 2019. So I'm just curious.
Yeah, this is, I guess, the really fun part, right? We have, I would say, hundreds of people that are working on this exact, the design and the concepts, and a lot of consultants and engineers that are working on this. So we've been doing a significant amount of surveying of the offshore, of the geology, of the waves, of the wind speeds, and then of course onshore. So all of that being to how we install the foundations. We need to understand the geology underneath. We need to understand all the geology when we lay the cable. We have all the design specifications for how our cable bundle will look. And then as we approach onshore, we have been working for years now on the actual electrical system design. And we have, I guess, Alex, who was here, but he's leading up a lot of that effort. And that is a building that's about, I guess he can speak to it, but you're talking about a substation that's about 5.5 acres of building. And so that is being carefully mapped. It's a extremely complex electrical design. Maybe you can speak to some of the designs going behind it.
So the location, we're going to have two. One is going to be within the Astoria complex. We don't have a physical location yet as part of the process. And then the original one coming where it's going to collect all the energy from the wind farm, that's going to be kind of in the middle of the offshore, in the middle of the wind farm itself. The structure itself, like Teddy said, it's pretty much the size of this building. It's going to be part within the offshore farm itself, the wind farm. Talking engineering wise, we do have kind of a conglomerate of different companies that we're working with. Hitachi, GE, several European companies that are all kind of working together to help us design and bring this substations to life. The Brooklyn substation is going to be right next to the Gowanus substation. So in the Red Hook part of Brooklyn, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Industry City. So literally right across the street from Industry City.
Actually, I can see it from I look out there right now. The reason that I'm asking about the subdivision, made any mock-up. Already, but I haven't seen anything really come out. I'm sorry. I haven't seen anything come out that self-describes what I'm asking. And I think
for directly your direct question as to support of the design of the structure, we could probably take that offline, and it'll probably be a question of how you would become a vendor for Equinor. So yeah, so we could probably take that offline.
well, I think that it's really important that you educate us, because I think that we've been going to a lot of meetings from my company, and Michael has brought us here because he feels that this could be something for Local 3,
Yes.
since we are really probably the best at these things.
Mhm.
So I just would like to, I was just wondering if you did any mock-ups, if you had any places that we could go so that we could at least, address some of the situations. Maybe we could be helpful to you as well.
Yeah, I think, like I said, I'm going to be right by one of these posters. We could talk a little bit more. My background is electrical. I've worked with Local 3 unions pretty much all my professional life. One of my brothers is a Local 3 electrician. Our family in Local 3, so we definitely talk more about how your companies can help us.
I don't know if I need this anymore, but please have some food. Please come out to us, introduce yourself, tell us what you're all about, ask more questions. We also have something called Padlet, which is there are QR codes around the room where we want you to leave us comments and questions for the project. That's how we're really garnering all your feedback. So please, scan the QR code, send us some questions, send us some comments, let us know what you think, or if you have suggestions. As from the community engagement perspective, I'm also want to know if there are nonprofits that we should be working with and having conversation with. Are there academic institutions? So, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Thank you again. Please have some food and enjoy the rest of the poster sessions. Thank you.